Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sean Langwell. I'm the host of the Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You podcast. I started this podcast in the end of 2023, and so far I have been literally blown away by the outpouring and vulnerability of my guests. Today is no exception. There's a fellow and friend of mine, Natalie Gould, who will be sharing with us some of her long COVID journey and talking about what that's like. Basically, if you like honest, vulnerable, and real stories about what it takes to not only become great, but self-confident and bold enough to be yourself, then this show is for you. Each of my guests started out as ordinary people like you and me, but have accomplished extraordinary things in their lives to be considered great masters or experts at what they have been called to do. Join me each episode for inspiring, encouraging, and meaningful conversations with diverse people from all walks of life and industry. Leaders and brave individuals who offer unique insights into the fields of arts, entertainment, business, finance, technology, healthcare, sports, psychology, recovery, self-improvement, personal growth, and so much more. Whether you are in the same fields as my guests or not, I guarantee you will walk away from each episode feeling better about yourself and inspired to take the next bold step toward your own goals and dreams. Your life will improve if you dare to be great and dare to be you. And my guest today is a woman by the name of Natalie Gould. She's got a farm called Sparrow and Crow Farm. And Natalie's done a lot. I mean, I was just reading the little blurb for the show and looking at her website. She's done a lot of these different things, and we'll get into that in a second here. But Natalie is a coach, a storyteller, and a retreat leader who guides people and organizations through transformation using embodied practices, i.e., somatic healing, rooted in nature, narrative, and nervous system regulation. After a post-viral condition left her disabled, Natalie recovered using somatic and mind-body approaches. This journey transformed her work. She now helps people make change in their lives, particularly learning to live more sustainably and with greater purpose. Her approach integrates her background in theater and outdoor education with extensive training in spiritual formation and leadership development. She spent over a decade in corporate leadership, including as a CFO of a small multinational software company, before dedicating herself fully to coaching and retreat work. Natalie is writing a memoir of her farm and healing journey and publishes a free monthly newsletter on Substack, where she weaves farm stories with practical teachings on nervous system regulation and living with greater presence and wholeness. I almost said wellness, but they're one and the same.
That's all right. Yeah.
Natalie, welcome.
I'm so excited to be here. And I have been listening to your podcast in the last few months and really enjoying the real stories of people. And I think that's important. How you share about daring to be great and daring to be you, like that is something every one of us can aim for. It's not just for special people that are famous and well known, but all of us can enter into that
And
space.
I appreciate that because some people, you mentioned this is only your second podcast. I've
Mhm.
had people on here where this being a guest on my show was the first time. And the title sometimes can be daunting to some
Mhm.
people, like Dare to Be Great. And that's kind of the purpose why it's Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You, because we all bring our own unique life experience, earned wisdom, lived experience, and you are no exception. And we're going to dive into that a little bit. This is a fun episode for me to learn from you, and that's one of the benefits that I get about having guests from literally all different walks of life and industry is I get to learn and I get a front row seat to hear you share and my guests share what their story was. And kind of as a starting point, I know you've done a little bit of preparation here,
Mhm.
so I'm going to ask an open-ended question, then we'll
Okay.
see where it goes. So let's start with where you're at and give us a little backstory as to what happened and what that was like with your long COVID story, because it's quite phenomenal what you've been able to do to walk through that and be where you're at today.
Yeah, I'm excited to share that story. Just to preface, there are two videos on my website that have longer versions of this story. So I'll try to keep it short so we can keep the podcast focused on what will be applicable to the most people. But in July 2021, I contracted COVID. I was fully vaccinated. But it was a mild case of COVID, which is really important for me to share because I think people have a misunderstanding that it has to be a severe case. But what I believe is what happens is that COVID triggers a secondary condition in the body. And I don't think it's different than chronic fatigue syndrome, which has been around for decades and has been triggered by other viruses or other stressful events. Basically, I got over the acute symptoms, but as the weeks and months went on, I spiraled down to, I would say, 80% disabled. And I continued to work a few hours a day, but that was basically all I did. And I had cognitive, physical, and eventually psychological issues going on because of how dysfunctional my nervous system was and a whole host of symptoms. I would probably around 60. Um, and I
So,
was in that condition for about 2 years until I found a way out.
oh my gosh. So let's dig into that just a little bit
Hmm.
because I'm a novice. I don't understand. I have a friend whose wife is coming out of long COVID
Hmm.
symptoms. But just for the listeners and those who may not have, we've heard a lot for 4 years during the
Yeah.
pandemic what some of the symptoms were, but there has not been a lot talked about for long COVID. So what exactly is that? I mean, 80% losing your physical and even cognitive abilities, it sounds like.
Yes.
How
And
did you manage
it's
that? What's that
it,
like?
how did I man? I have no idea for some of it, but what's strange is that my version, the symptoms I have, are going to be different from another person's. We probably
Hmm.
have overlapping symptoms. A common one is what's described as brain fog. And that sounds like not a big deal, but it can be very severe for some people. Mine was quite severe, and different points in my day would be worse. So I couldn't process what people were saying to me or respond very quickly, and I couldn't think of words. I would stop mid-sentence. So I described the whole sensations. I also couldn't sit or stand because I had POTS syndrome, which is the body's regulation of blood flow in order to sit or stand. The blood vessels do something different so that gravity doesn't take all the blood from your brain, right?
Okay.
And the body wasn't managing a lot of things. My blood sugar wasn't being managed correctly. My sleep had major sleep distortions. I developed strong sound sensitivities. So, all kinds of things around my body, which is very scary. And it seems like, how can my entire body be, breaking down? It didn't make any sense. But luckily, I pieced together there's one thing that's in common with all these different things, and that's the nervous system, because that's controlling all these different symptoms. It didn't make sense to me that I could have so many different issues until I thought there's one common denominator, and that's the nervous system. So I described it a little bit like if I had drank 3 or 4 bottles of wine and had 5 or 6 cups of coffee, and that's feeling every day. So the ability to move my body or to speak or to process really slowed down. Had to focus on every movement with conscious intention, like you were really drunk, or when you have a lot of coffee, very wired and anxious feeling, and my heart rate would speed up and kind of adrenaline rushes, but for 2 years. And so it was very uncomfortable to be in my brain and my body for that time period. Oh, you're muted, Sean.
Were you dependent upon other people to help support you? I mean, did it get to that place where you couldn't even
Definitely.
fend for yourself?
Yeah, I couldn't cook any of my own food, and I was able to shower. I basically had to lay flat almost all the day. So I sat when I took the shower. I didn't do any house cleaning. I did a load of laundry a week, I think.
Well,
And
that's not necessarily bad. No, I'm just
I
kidding.
know, but I had such sound sensitivities and processing that being with people was made me feel unwell. And this sounds very strange to understand, but so having people come to help me made me feel worse because of this processing and sound sensitivity. So people drop food on my front porch. I had a woman come and help me by cleaning my house once a month, but her coming, I would feel awful for days afterwards because
Mhm.
of the impact of that social interaction. There's
I
something called post-exertional malaise. So you do an activity, cognitive or physical, and then the repercussions in the body can last for days afterwards. So it was very isolating, but yes, I definitely depended on people. I just was, I don't know, sort of hermit life. So,
Yeah, and I mean, that's just it's sad and it's hard, and you identified the one common thread. You
mhm.
started to talk about it with the nervous
Mhm.
system.
Yeah.
So let's go down that path, no pun
Yes.
intended, but the head, the heart. I use this in my talk that I did up at Elk Grove Writers Conference in another workshop where it's this, I call it the 2 foot drop, but I want to hear it from your perspective
Hmm.
because our neuroscience of the body, which is integrated with our mind, body, spirit, is head,
Hmm.
heart, gut.
Hmm.
And there's a lot behind that from a physiological standpoint. And you're
Right.
probably way more versed to talk about that, not just from a diagnostic perspective, but from your own healing journey, because that's where we're going to go with this.
Yeah, and getting out of it really took me to get the education of how it worked so then I could think of, well, what can I do to change that? So
Hmm.
the root cause for me was in the autonomic nervous system was dysfunctioning. And so that is the automatic functions that the brain, sends out to when we should digest and regulating blood sugar and this heart rate and your blood pressure. These are things that happen automatically. I think people have probably heard of, fight or flight or rest and
Hmm.
digest. And those are the two sets of nerves from the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems, and I like to describe it as they're both trying to keep us safe and alive, these two systems. One is short-term survival and one is long-term survival. So parasympathetic is the long-term, the rest and digest side of things. It's making sure we have the right nutrients we need. It's repairing cells and replacing cells. And that's all so that we can live hopefully for decades, right? The sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, is about imminent danger and keeping us alive in the moment because digesting food won't matter if the tiger has eaten us.
Right.
So that sympathetic state is necessary, but the goal is that we will come activated into that state to deal with an immediate, you know, danger or stressor, and then be able to come back down into that
Hmm.
parasympathetic state and be there most of the time. So unfortunately, most of us, and that's why I want to broaden this message. One message is for people listening, if you've experienced long COVID or chronic fatigue syndrome, you absolutely can recover, even if it's not in the news or in doctors' offices. They often don't even say this, but there's hundreds of videos of people who recovered. So that's for that specific audience. But the general audience, most of us are living in a heightened sympathetic state. We have become a conditioned into being in that higher fight or flight response and not coming back down as regularly into the parasympathetic state. So I see my illness, what was happening is my stressor load, it's called allostatic load, your different stressors. Maybe it's not sleeping enough. Maybe it's a virus. Maybe it's a stressful life event or work situation. And those things, if we're not processing them or dealing with them in our mind and bodies, personality patterns, that's one that
Hmm.
was huge for me. It can build up to the point that it's kind of a breaking point for the nervous system. It's too often in that short-term survival mode and not in the long-term rest and digest state. So learning that everything was kind of about providing my nervous system a sense of safety and what could I do to provide that sense of safety? And then it opened up a world of things, both body-based practices like breath work, but
Hmm.
also top-down things, evaluating my thinking patterns and my stressful thinking patterns and way of operating the world, and how could I modify those things, and psychological work as well. So it's a whole lot of things, but down to providing safety for our system.
But you're talking about three core systems for the central nervous system with
Mhm.
the autonomic, the parasympathetic, and the
Mhm.
sympathetic. And let's just touch briefly, and then we'll go back to some
Mhm.
specifics of what you did to help create the balance and come out
Yeah.
of this, because it sounds from what you and I have spoken about and where I think we're going with this is that it took a lot of work and effort on your part
Yeah.
to not only understand it, but to find a way to navigate and change some behaviors and or practices to make it through. But hearing you talk about the sympathetic nervous system and
Mhm.
that fight or flight response, I've written a lot about it. I think that you mentioned two audiences. There's one who have
Mhm.
suffered from, chronic fatigue syndrome as well as long COVID.
Mhm.
The secondary audience, maybe we're going to go here, that I see is us in general. We're
Yeah.
in a state of fear so much, and it's perpetuated by media, it's
Mhm.
perpetuated by our own thinking, it's perpetuated by our beliefs, attitudes, and action or inaction. And that's the area where you and I have parallel lanes that we're working in and trying to
Yeah.
help people. But let's just talk about that from a broad 30,000 foot view second for a minute, where you're
Mhm.
talking about fight or flight of from anxiety attacks, for example,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
imposter syndrome, or just some things that are more commonplace, but that is part of that paras or not the sympathetic
Sympathetic.
nervous system of how can we make some simple modifications. And what I want to do is ask this question generally and then have you come back to talk about the other two that you can.
Mhm. Yeah, that it making those first just recognizing that it's and how it works was important for me, and then the belief that I could change the situation was super huge, and then
Mm,
it's a series of different things getting back to that idea of how I could provide safety, and maybe it's physiological. If I am not I'm under eating or overeating or eating really poor foods, that's a stress on the body because that's
mhm,
adding a burden on the body. If I'm not getting enough sleep, then that is a stress burden on the body. So just finding from the bottom up or the top down, what were the simple things that I could do to shift it? And in my situation, I was so disabled, it was hard to think that anything could matter, right? Because it was so dysfunctional. But this is true for anyone. And I'm sure you agree with it. Like the small, simple changes, forming small little habits,
mhm,
those things build and it allow you to invest again, use the improvements in your wellness to invest again in new things and it snowballs. So a little thing for me, really focusing on my breath to calm the system down. So I did a lot of things to calm the system down and then the reentry kind of things to uh, be able to encounter stress and not react in the same old
mhm,
the way. And that is a part, it's not the goal in nervous system retraining is not to be calm always or to be flat emotionally. Instead, it's to be able to have the flexibility to become activated when needed. If you need to jump in the pool because someone fell in, you want that sympathetic part of your nervous system to go and be able to rescue that person and then be able to train the nervous system, condition the nervous system to come back down into a, a parasympathetic state again. But it's little things. I agree with you with the news and social media. This is a huge stress factor for a lot of people, and it's sending danger signals to the brain that we don't aren't really. It's not a tiger. But that stress response is acting exactly the same way. So it may be reducing stressful input
mhm.
and also learning how to interact with stressful input in a new way, a less reactive way, so that internal and external changes.
And some of that, I mean, some people, when you're knee deep in a depressed state or a highly heightened fear
Anxious state.
state,
Hmm.
or whatever the case is, I call it
Hmm.
embracing the space between extremes, which was the subtitle for my last book, because
Hmm.
these extremes are going to be there. They're
Hmm.
part of life. They're always there, and there are polarities that help us find and navigate. And the body, naturally, from what I understand too, the body wants to be in a state of balance, but it's also has those outs that you just talked about of being able to activate when the time is necessary, that
Hmm.
this is danger, danger, Will Robinson. We need to heighten it up.
Hmm.
But navigating and consciously making choices to increase our awareness is part of it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But how do you go about? I mean, what were some specific examples that you may have incorporated to find and get back to a centered state, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, and that balance, you're right. Homeostasis is the term for the body always wanting to be in balance. But if you've heard the story about the frog in a pot, do you
Oh,
know? Yeah,
yes.
right. So I did
Share it
never.
because other people haven't heard it.
Okay, so I have not tested this because I just won't. But the idea is if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and turn it up, the frog will die, it will boil to death because it is doesn't realize the temperature around it has been rising and that it's too hot for it. Its body is acclimating, it's being conditioned to the environment, and it
Mhm.
doesn't realize it's too hot. But if you put a boiling have boiling water and put a frog in it, it'll jump out because it automatically realizes this is too much for me.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us, and myself included, don't realize that the water has been rising and getting hotter around us, and we're at a breaking point. So the body is balancing, but it's creating this new level of normal that's in this heightened state, and we can't see that we're in it. So we're balancing out, but we're just the level of stress is getting higher and higher, and then the body's more tense. So the first thing I had to do was reduce the external stressors. So this meant when I finally realized I could get well, it meant leaving my job and being 100, taking the risk of that financial risk to say, I think I can get better. I need to reduce the demands I'm putting on my system in order to get back down to a calm state. So, making a big life change, but also small life changes. I worked on adapting my diet a little bit, but not in a stress-based way, because you can cause stress just by getting consumed by the dietary world, and that's the counterproductive. But
Right.
making all these different things, meditation was huge to lower the whole system. And then and looking at simple things like my posture, I had the illness, I had become really, really tense because of the pain I was in, and realizing that was a danger signal to my brain too. So, what could I do to relieve the tension to signal to my brain a level of safety? So, those are, you know, I probably did hundreds of different things, but all aimed towards lowering the stress burden. And then I said like the retraining response or reconditioning, that inner work of what we could do. And let me give an example of that. So we can
Sure.
make a lot of external changes in our life, like if we are in a unhealthy relationship, you can make the shift to leave that relationship. I needed to leave my job. Or you're in a stressful job and you can either take the scary step to go to your boss and say, I have these boundaries and needs, and see they'll either meet your needs to make changes, or you take the risk that you need to find a new job. But those are all ways we can uh, modify our lives to change the external cases. But there's a level we can't change. One of the factors that increased the stress in my system, and I think for a lot of people in Sonoma County, were the Tubbs fire and the fire seasons afterwards. And although we have great things we do now for better notification systems, there are external things we cannot control. We can't really prevent something like that fire from, if the wind is blowing and it's ignited, we'd have limited control to stop it. And so one of the things you can do, which is what I missed, I didn't really understand, is the level of internal safety you can provide yourself in those cases. And I think, Sean, you can confirm, but one of the big parts of the 12-step programs is acknowledging that we are not in control, and that there are things we can do. And so that for the nervous system work is crucial too, to say, I can't actually control all of these things, but within this space, this is where I can make some changes.
And let's touch on that just a little bit deeper too, because what you're referring to is a prayer that's been around for a long time.
Hmm.
Um, I can't remember Niedenhold or regardless, Reinhold Niedenbauer. It's called the Serenity Prayer. As
Hmm.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can,
Hmm.
wisdom to know the difference. And that's just a simple mantra, whether we have faith backgrounds or not.
Yeah.
It's discernment. What I get out of that is this discernment, what you're talking about, and
Hmm.
understanding 100% what is within our control
Hmm.
and what is not, and focusing mostly on the things that we can't control. You already mentioned them, changing diet, changing some of our sleep habits, changing some of the ways that we choose to consume media or not,
Yeah.
people that we choose to hang around with. And
Correct.
all these are factors that influence our our attitudes and beliefs about ourselves, but about other people, and creating this state of homeostasis is not everybody knows what the
Hmm.
homeostasis is, but just creating balance in our lives.
Balance. Yeah.
That's a choice.
Hmm. And it
Um,
doesn't feel like a choice at sometimes because it feels so overwhelming.
it
Sometimes
does.
we need other people to show us what our choices are in a situation. Um, because in my illness, I actually took me a long time to why I hadn't thought of leaving my job before 2 years in. I was so un physically disabled, and so every day was awful. I didn't want to live on many days.
That's so.
Um, yeah, but the fact that I couldn't see that I had a choice to leave my job still mystifies me a little bit. But when we're in the water, we often can't see those choices. And so that's why I'm sure you too. One of my joys as a coach is helping people to see that they're not blocked, that there actually are lots of choices. And let's actually evaluate what your choices are.
But at the outset, going back to part of the reason why we decided to have this
Hmm.
conversation is initially, did you feel like, oh my God, I'm a victim of this long COVID. I didn't choose this, and now you're faced with something that was, for all intents and purposes, out of your control?
Yeah, definitely fell
Let's
out of my
talk
control.
about that
Hmm.
because that's a normal, natural human reaction to stuff that
Hmm.
happens to us.
Hmm.
But the response that you've now turned into a coaching business is exactly what people need to hear of
Yeah.
how do we make this shift to do some of these things that you're talking about talk about it from a psychological perspective, and then I want to hear a little bit about the somatic approaches, whether it's martial arts, because I know you've got some martial
Hmm.
arts experience as well.
Yeah. So, I had already existing an autoimmune
Mhm.
illness. And so I think I had gotten it, it had been very severe about 15 years before, psoriatic arthritis, so inflammation of my joints. And I had worked on stress management, external stress management to manage that condition pretty well. And so when long COVID came, I didn't go through what I did with my first round with a chronic condition, which is a lot of anger and depression and resentment. But I moved quickly into an acceptance point of view. But I really did feel like it was beyond my control. And it was hard for me to admit, which I can see now, when I was starting to learn about this stress management, my pride got in the way. And I'm like, I was already aware of stress management. I knew it from my other chronic condition, right? So, what I thought I wasn't stressed before I got my COVID infection, and I really resisted this because I didn't want. It was hard for me to see what I was blind to, and I think when we are, it wasn't really my fault that I got the condition because I was the things that I was doing that aided me into getting it were subconscious or unconscious factors. So to process any shame that might be associated with that is really important. I didn't cause myself to get ill, and yet there were factors in my behaviors and in my unconscious and subconscious patterns of operating in the world and lack of knowledge. It's no fault of my own, and yet there were things I could do to resolve the things that had made me susceptible to a overactive immune system, and getting this exaggerated nervous system response. There were things I could do to now prevent it. And I will say that the work I did on nervous system work has basically resolved the arthritis. It resolved
Oh, wow.
migraines I had since I was 9 years old, and chronic neck and back pain, which is uh, in my whole family. And I thought, well, that's how I'm made. It's just the genetic predisposition. But there was a whole world of things I could do to improve my situation. It wasn't just, this is my lot in life.
So what I'm hearing you share, and this is just a little reflective moment for me as a podcast host and having talked to, 48 people on the show, not all 48, maybe 45, but um, you mentioned a couple key words there,
Hmm.
pride
Hmm.
and not feeling shame.
Hmm.
And I'm going to push a little bit deeper into that because
Hmm.
it's common when we have some experience that we've practiced, mastered, or done something that worked in this situation that we automatically, as human beings, tend to either think that we're either above it, or B, that we can, the response can be all over the map. You can go through the 5 stages of grief, which you already alluded to, or you can go
Hmm.
through anger, resentment, and then finally get to a place of acceptance. But how what was the little thing that you did? Because you have the word I'm looking for is self-awareness. You were
Hmm.
aware enough to see this and willing enough to go, you know what? I need to change something a little bit here. Not everybody is at that place, Natalie.
And
You
it
are, because you've already had that, and having had the history of dealing with it with psoriatic arthritis, which I'm starting to struggle with now, and I'm going,
mm,
"Urgh."
we can talk about it, don't worry. The I don't know, one was desperation in this case, and that a desperation can be a gift that I was willing to let go of
Okay.
the pride, but also just grace. I still think about it like what the way that I was open. I don't know why I was open when I was open to do it, but desperation aided it. But then I just felt like something happened that made me aware. But a couple tools I would say that recognized before I got unwell during the pandemic when we were all just trying to find things to do, I learned about the Enneagram, if you're familiar with the
Oh, yes.
Enneagram. And so I had identified my type, and then I'm just gonna out myself right here, embarrassing, but I'm a type 2, which is the helper.
I was just gonna say, I almost blurted it out, and I'm like, don't put words in her mouth. Okay, yes,
She's
you're.
a 2, and the sort of core, they say sin or fault is pride. And I'm just gonna say, when I first read that, I thought, I don't think I'm very prideful. I think I'm a pretty humble person, which is exactly what a prideful person would say, right? So I didn't realize the amount of pride that I had that was, resistant to accepting help,
Hmm.
resistant to thinking. Even the program that I found, the first time I heard a recovery story linked me to a program by a man in Australia who had recovered from chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, and POTS. And when I watched the first videos, like the video quality to me was not fancy, and that was my pride. Like that prevented me for weeks.
Oh,
'Cause-
yeah.
Right? And
And
then
honestly, I'm gonna interject. That's part of the reason why the first 5 episodes, I was spending all this time trying to get it perfect and edit it. And I'm like, you know what? That's not what this show's about.
no. And in
So,
fact, working on my inner perfectionist was one of the huge tools, and we can talk about that next time because I use story to help me work on these
mhm.
mental patterns, but my that inner helper who was just compulsively trying to help other people, and I didn't subconsciously I saw some of it, but I didn't see how compulsive it was to make
Yeah.
myself feel safe. If other people needed me, this is all subconscious. If other people needed me, then my nervous system felt safe. And if other people felt calm and their nervous systems were well rate, I didn't know it was nervous systems, but if I was getting calm energy from other people, that was the only place in which I felt calm. So working on fixing everyone was this impossible task that I didn't know I had assigned to myself subconsciously. And so a lot of the work was mental work, releasing myself of that obligation and actually figuring out what I needed. Because as a helper, I was so focused on other people. I actually was totally out of touch about what my body needed or my soul or my spirit was really seeking. And so that was a huge amount of work. So there's physiological things and then this emotional, psychological work to help bring safety into my system in a new way, not the old coping mechanisms, but a new way of feeling safe in my body.
And I'm glad we're having this conversation because I've spent time with my coach, who is a somatic coach
Mhm,
primarily. She's also a body worker. And
mhm,
she introduced me to the Enneagram, I don't know, 2 or 3 sessions in.
mhm,
And we're looking at it and I'm kind of trying to soak it up because I'm a planner. I vacillate. I found out that I'm definitely a one. I'm
okay.
one fringe parts of eight where I get a little too driven and want to bowl over everybody, but
Mhm,
primarily it's 173. Um, but my wife's a two,
mhm,
coach is a six. And so I understand this identity, and it's not a typecasting, but what
mhm,
came out of this was having a better, greater realization of how I process information internally and externally and use that as a frame for how I choose to interact with all of it, with other human
yeah.
beings, with myself, and with my own spiritual presence.
Mhm.
It's like, holy crap, it was like the lights went on, and I'm like, somebody's home, finally. I get
And
it.
what I love about this personality model, and you're right, it's not like we're all very different, but it gives you a pathway to transformation. And as a coach, it's not, I don't give the same advice to every person because my personality really needed to be a little more self-focused.
Hmm.
Whereas another person, their personality is too self-focused, and for their growth, they need to be moving more outwardly to other people. So the Enneagram, I think, is lovely because it takes in some of these differences that we have. One, it's not one size fits all. Some of us, I'm an over planner, so I needed to learn to be more relaxed and let things, unfold. Whereas if there's someone who struggles with planning anything and they struggle to get anything accomplished, they're going to need opposite sort of corrective balance than I need. And so everyone's journey is going to be a little different to find balance.
Yeah, and once you came to that epiphany, because you read through the descriptions of what that is as far as a helper, um, I don't want to go too off topic because we're going to
Hmm.
save this more for your book and the coaching session.
Hmm.
We'll do it in December. But what was it like to have that epiphany? How did you feel is the right question to ask.
It was a slow process of understanding this, the level of pride or seeing it. But once it's that snowballing thing, right? I started to see something and then I make a shift and then the meditation helped a lot because then you're able to get a little distance between your reactions and your thoughts. And I can
Hmm.
observe them a little bit more and see, oh my gosh, when you were so unwell and maybe I found an article online that I thought would help long COVID. Immediately, I had such limited energy. Immediately, compulsively, I was sending it to someone else I thought could use it, right? Instead of just stopping and saying, how can I help myself with this article? And so noticing how automatic those patterns were. And I think we will get into it next time, but it took a lot of retraining of these automatic reactions we have, physiological as well as emotional reactions. They get conditioned. There's Pavlov and his dogs, right? We who found out that the dogs he was feeding dogs, but first there was a bell that rang, and the dog started salivating when the bell rang, and they took the food away and they rang the bell, and the dog still salivated because their nervous system got conditioned to a certain response. And we are really not that different than dogs. And
Not at
so,
all.
not at all. And that I used that was something in the program I took about retraining our scared puppy. That was my nervous system. And I was
Oh God, I love that.
yeah, I really loved it too because if you've ever seen a dog who had come from an abusive situation, it
Yes.
takes a long time for them to not flinch when you raise your hand, even if you've never hit them, because they've been conditioned into a certain response. But with time and patience, you can provide them that sense of safety that allows them to break that conditioning. And our bodies, physiologically as well as our emotional brains, are really no different than that. And so it's the tricky thing is finding the right, having the patience, the willingness,
Mm.
and finding the right tools to identify the conditioned responses we have and find ways to break them and move it into something that's a healthier place to be.
So part of the question that I wanted to ask too was, this epiphany of wanting to be the caretaker of kids,
Hmm.
other people, the transformation. This is going to come back to wrapping this up to where you
Hmm.
can apply that to how you took care of yourself, of allowing it to be okay to not have to focus out here,
Hmm.
but to turn the focus inward and learn to be okay with it. Because for twos, that's not easy to do. Our validation, and I have a big part of me that's a two too,
Mhm.
of people pleasing, of the
Yeah.
codependent type of behaviors of where you want to get this, but we get something in return for that, which is validation.
Hmm.
Our identity and our presence and our need for being part of this equation in a relationship is justified by our willingness and our heart to give. And when that's taken away or changed, it's hard for some twos, and I've got a big part of two in me,
Hmm.
to say, okay, I need to take care of myself right now.
Yeah, and it was
It's
really hard, really hard. And um, I guess one of the things that helped me, I did the artist way as one of the practices of in my recovery. I just was hands in anything I thought would bring me safety. And the morning pages, which is a stream of consciousness journaling, helped me to uncover when I was suppressing thoughts that I considered selfish, I guess, and working through those. But oh my gosh, where was I going with this?
well, it's as far as focusing on others versus
Oh, focusing
internal.
on me. And so one of the things she said is like, what's your image of God? Or and so I wrote out in the morning pages that it was love and it was this endless flow of giving and receiving. So that's my image of God. And what I realized was you are not practicing both sides of that equation. You are you are weighted too heavily towards giving and you need to be working on receiving. So, almost assigning myself, not almost, I was assigning myself homework and but I had to do, kind of cognitive behavioral therapy type practices to keep reminding myself, your goal right now, later you will be able to help people again. Because I still am a helper, right? That's it. And it's why I went into
You're a coach
coaching.
too, and I'm a coach,
But
and that's part of what our validation comes by helping other people and watching the lights go on. We're not doing it for them, we're guiding them.
right.
That
But
epiphany that happens is rewarding.
But to do it in a healthy way, I needed to shed some of the desire for them to. I read a book on the Enneagram that said that twos, they want you to be happy. I want you to be happy, and I want me to be the reason.
Yeah.
Right. So
Because that's our importance, right?
right. And I was like, that's not true. I'm like, oh, maybe it is a little true. When I first started coaching, as I was doing some small things as I was not quite 100% recovered yet, but knew this is a work area of work. And I was able to watch myself and thought, oh, look at this reaction when the person hasn't done the thing you suggested. Your
Hmm.
internal reaction when they haven't done what you suggested, or when they came up with something different and they're completely happy, they made a change and it wasn't your idea. Look at how you reacted internally. And it was hard to see, but it was the training I needed because I have been managing in my old job and I loved working with people. I was a CFO, but the thing that I thrived on was the team building, the people development. And I think I was good at it, but this aspect that needed to really humble myself and make it not about me, even if people didn't realize there was an element that was about me and my that codependency type things you were describing, and to be able to break down those habits. And it I'm still working on it, but have made so much progress because it was necessary for me to live in a calmer state in my body, to lose that need to control how people are behaving and doing
Right.
my ideas, because my ideas are good ones, right?
All of our ideas are good. If the world just adhered to what I think are the right ideas,
Right.
happy. Sure.
Yeah.
So let's shift it from the internal, the mental side, and talk about the movement side because
Hmm.
sure you will agree, movement is incredibly important. That's
Yeah.
part of somatic coaching. It's part of martial arts.
Hmm.
There's something kinesthetically that happens to integrate the mind body spiritual functions of our central nervous system when we
Hmm.
incorporate not just meditation, but actual intentional movement. So, can you
Right.
talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm also a Lindy Hop swing dancer,
Oh my
and
gosh.
yeah, and I loved it, and it was the most, before I started practicing meditation, it was the most meditative state that I was in, because as a follower in a lead follow dance, my I at first wanted to always help, right? Figure out what was coming next, but you can't do that if you're going to be a good follower. You have to be present to the moment. So the physical interaction of that dance and being fully present in the moment was really a good nervous system regulator for me. And then the pandemic hit, right? So I wasn't able to have that aspect that I didn't realize how important it had been for my nervous
Mm,
system. But you're right, that ability for the body to be moving in space provides a sense of safety. I think there's an integration, there's a release as well. And if you have a practice that where you can kind of get in the zone, I started doing qigong, a little bit of tai chi movements as a recovery practice. I am absolutely not an expert. Took videos online, but it still is a combination of breath work, movement, and focusing and calming the mind that I think is really healthy for the nervous system. So I think finding a practice, people can use movement in a stressful way though too. If you get into that
totally.
over intense, over exercising mode, I think it will counteract some of these benefits of movement. But yeah, it's definitely good, even physiologically too. It helps the lymph system to get rid of toxins in your body when you move.
Yeah, and I've heard and read studies too where it's just even something as simple as walking at a brisk pace, even
Hmm.
as little as a half mile a day, at least 3 or 4 times a week,
Hmm.
increases your blood flow. It helps your heart, lowers. It's so beneficial.
So good for you.
But there's a memory aspect that I'm not equipped to articulate fully, but there's different types of learning. And part of the reason I brought up movement is to have things stick
Hmm.
when we're incorporating changing lifestyle, changing behaviors, thoughts. It's the movement that actually makes it last. The
Hmm.
olfactory senses that we have are clearly the deepest. They go straight down to a core where if I told you, can you remember what grandma's closet smells like? You'll go back to your grandma's closet like that.
Right.
But the movement aspect is a way, whether we're kinesthetic learners or not, is a way to solidify and cement what it is that we're trying to change, those small micro habits. And
Hmm.
how did the Qigong and any other meditative practices, whether it was, doing yoga, how did that help you come out of this to be here articulating a couple years later with me and now coaching students,
Hmm.
where you're not in that space of fight or flight anymore?
Yeah, and it was really hard. One of the most common symptoms of chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID is exercise intolerance. So, doing even the most minor things caused a huge symptom onset. So, movement is absolutely important for getting out of those conditions, and yet it felt like a trap because of that. But I basically knew that movement was important and thought, what is the smallest amount of movement I could do? And they first started just by tensing my muscles in my calves and my thighs and relaxing them. That was it. And it might seem so small, but for my condition, that was what was necessary as a starting point. So when we look at micro habits, even people who are able to take a walk, I think you have this all or nothing mindset. Like, I need to take an hour walk. Take a 2 minute walk. For me, I started with just this movement of my muscles, and then with time, I slowly could build up. And I remember when I first tried to do the qigong, it was a 5 minute video, five qigong and 5 minutes a day. I couldn't stand for 5 minutes. And so to just know you're going to do 30 seconds and that's going to be the starting point. And to just, slowly retraining my nervous system that it could do those things again and to be patient with it. So movement was a tricky one when you have those conditions, but it is necessary. You just have to do it in a really titrated, small way to improve it. But now I see it so importantly because I was out of touch with my body in the sensations in my body. So I use both my movement practices and stretching, as well as in meditation. I usually start with something called somatic tracking, which is just noticing without judgment sensations in my body, saying and I usually say it out loud. I notice that I'm feeling a little tension in my neck, or there's a sharp pain in my knee. And it's not fear-based, it's just noticing.
Mhm.
And through that process, you kind of approach those sensations. You learn the radar system of your body as well. And then I could use that as a way of either choosing to focus on that in my movement or look at what emotional things might be contributing to that tension. And so that's not quite movement, but it was this importance of reconnecting with the body as a source of information gathering. Before I would push beyond symptoms. I would either ignore them or just treat them as if they were an annoyance. And now I look at the whispers. So I would say I'm fully recovered from those conditions, but I'm still going to get whispers from my body. It's not like I don't ever experience tension, but now I listen to it at the small level and work through that. I don't know if I answered your question, but I
No,
hope
and
I.
that does because it's an awareness. It comes back
Hmm.
to awareness, and
Hmm.
also to put a full circle as we wrap up here on understanding that awareness and also understanding that we don't necessarily have to change everything, that the body is there somatically. Our body
Hmm.
experiences and tells our brain that it's painful because something's wrong. It,
Right.
it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to fix it, but understanding it, welcoming it, observing it without having judgment, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
it's incredibly healing. I actually have practiced this recently because I have some serious shoulder pain going on. I'm seeing a chiropractor, and
Hmm.
it was between appointments, and I didn't want to go spend the money to go get another one. And I just said, let's see if I can do this with some meditation
Hmm.
and a heating pad, but with meditation.
Hmm.
And I was just focusing on the sensation and then literally visualizing, letting that feel it change color, watching
Hmm.
it go from red to ultimately to white. And I kid you not,
It goes away.
it went away.
Yeah. So this is we could go do a whole podcast on this, but mind body work in that way. The pain is created in the brain. It usually the body sends a signal to the brain to say something's wrong, and then the pain decides what level, I mean, the brain decides what level of pain to create. So usually the signal system is telling us something's wrong in the body that, like when you stub your toe, it doesn't want you to walk a lot on it until it's better. But the pain signals, the brain can start sending pain signals when there's no damage in an area as well. So
Mm,
it actually can be an emotional or another reason that you might be experiencing pain, and the pain is still absolutely real, but you can help the body, yes, to either visualize healing. I think helps the brain to do those things, as well as approaching it in a way that allows the brain to turn off that danger signal that it might have turned on by mistake.
right.
Um, and either way, what you just described is an excellent way to help to reduce that. I've had that experience as well, and just visualize the tension releasing. And in the past, I would go to the chiropractor, and I still think chiropractors are great, but I've had instances where I thought, let's just see if I can do this, doing these other methods with stretching, but also with that brain work. And
Mhm.
sure enough, I could resolve those issues using those practices.
And the breath work you talked about at the outset of the
Hmm.
show is also incredibly important. I mean, I
Yeah.
have this note up here that is where we started before we started recording, which is
Hmm.
pause, breathe, smile. And those are three words that we can all do. It doesn't cost a damn thing,
Hmm.
but we all have the capacity. That's 100% controllable. Yes,
Hmm.
breathing is an autonomic nervous system response, but the intentional presence and mindfulness that goes around breath work and pausing, those are intentional actions that we can take to
And
and
what is more, you're saying it's automatic, but the breath is one of the few automatic things that we actually consciously can control.
yeah.
So I can't control my heart rate. I can't consciously tell my heart to slow down, but I can consciously decide to breathe slower or take a deeper breath. So it is a main way of sort of a back door into the brainstem to calm the system. So we can consciously calm a system that we don't have a lot of control over because it's automatic, it's unconscious, but that's why breath is so important because it's a way that we can actually talk to that nervous system directly by controlling it and changing our breathing habits.
And we'll talk about it in the next show too. We'll see if we can pick it up because we'll start the same time and hopefully that'll prompt me. But it's also a way to integrate the three minds, if you will, from the gut
Hmm.
level up to the heart to the brain because it's
Exactly.
the central nervous system and it's regulating oxygen flow and that's helping to reduce a lot of the negative hormones that we feel that are stress hormones. So let's pick up that conversation next time, Natalie.
Sounds great.
This is thank you. You bring an articulation and a personal experience to this conversation that I have yet not had before, and I really appreciate you coming to take some time to share your experience with us. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to add?
Internet's unstable, it says. So I didn't hear, maybe
Oh,
repeat now. Try again.
I was just saying, sorry. I was just saying this has been a delightful conversation, and thank you for bringing your articulation into the conversation and shedding some light on something that hasn't been talked about a lot. I've
Mm.
not had a guest on the show to talk about chronic fatigue syndrome or long COVID. But what else might you want to say to anybody who's out there listening, just from your lips to their ears?
I guess just there's more that you can change than you realize in your life. And if people are interested in, finding out more about uh, what I do or whether I might be able to help them to reach out on my website. I'm happy to do a 30-minute call and just kind of hear where the landscape of what they're thinking they need to change and see if we might be a right fit. But yeah, you can change a lot more than you know, and no matter what your situation is, there's room for change.
What is your website? Go ahead and drop that in.
Sure, it's sparrowcrowfarm.com.
Sparrow, double ROW, crowfarm.com.
Hmm. Hmm. And I've worked with people who are 18, and I've supported someone who was 95.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
it's wonderful, and you in all different places that they felt blocked, including community. Some young people who have autism and ADHD and are working to figure out how to work better in their nervous systems, and that's been a great pleasure. So it's a wide gamut of people I work with, and I look forward to even just sharing some emails with people as they explore ideas.
Oh, well, it's been a delight to have you on the show, folks. We've been visiting with Natalie Gould. We will have her back at the beginning of December for a follow-up to talk more about the coaching and drilling down into some of the somatic and coaching practices, mind, body, spirit, whatever the conversation goes. Once again, my name is Sean Langle. I'm the host of Dare to Be Great, Dare to Be You. It's been a pleasure hanging out with you. And if you like the show, follow it. There's a lot of people that are starting to follow the show, and that makes me happy. I'm not doing this for money. I'm not editing it. We're doing it to have real conversations with real people because we care. And that's what the show's all about. So thank you again, Natalie.
Thank you, Sean. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure. We'll see you soon.